swore that he was not Cooper, just a guy trying his luck. But was it him? While he was serving a 45-year sentence, he had made a courageous and cunning prison escape, only later to be killed in a shootout with cops. The agent that killed him said this: "When I shot Richard McCoy, I shot D.B. Cooper at the same time." However, that doesn't quite work, as McCoy's family told police while Cooper's air heist was going on, McCoy was with them having a party for Thanksgiving Eve. Then, in 1980, an 8-year-old boy on holiday made a discovery when he was on the riverbank of the Columbia River. The boy pulled $5,800 from the bank, all in $20 Federal Reserve notes. This was part of the ransom. Many theories were put forward as to how the bills ended up there. Did they float there? Were they buried there? No one really knew. Some people thought it was Ted Mayfield, a skydiving teacher with a history of criminality, including stealing a plane and armed robbery. Mayfield even called the FBI 4 hours after the heist to give them a list of skydivers who might have done it. But there's no cognate evidence to say Mayfield was D.B. Cooper. What about Kenneth Christensen? He was a spitting image for the sketch of Cooper. He was a former paratrooper, and he'd even spent time working as a flight attendant on Northwest Orient. He was usually broke, but then in 1972 suddenly had bags of cash and bought a house. It gets better. On his deathbed in 1994, he told his brother, "There's something you should know, but I cannot tell you." The brother then discovered that in his bank he had around $200,000, and he had also been left gold. Meanwhile, flight attendant Schaffner said he was a dead ringer for Cooper. The brother wrote in 2004, close to death himself, "Before I die, I would like to find out if my brother was D.B. Cooper. From what I know, I feel that he was, and without a doubt." We very much doubt it was Barbara Dayton, a trans woman who had once said she did it to get back at the airline for not being able to get a commercial pilot's license. She changed her tune anyway when she found out she might actually be charged for the hijacking. What about William Gossett, an ace parachutist who had survival training? According to an attorney called Galen Cook, Gossett had admitted he had done it. Gossett's son believes his dad did it, saying he got very rich in 1971 and then went on a gambling spree in Las Vegas. Still, the evidence is weak. Then there's Robert Richard Lepsey, whose car was found nearby the airport and who suddenly decided to take off to Mexico. When his daughter saw the sketch of Cooper, apparently she shouted, "That's Dad!" She gave the FBI a DNA sample some years later, but it seems they didn't think Lepsey was their man. Still, we might wonder if he's sipping on pina coladas right now, basking on an Acapulco beach at the expense of an American insurance company. Or could it have been Dwayne Weber, who told his wife just before he died, "I'm Dan Cooper"? He was seen near to where the kid had found the money, and he also looked like Cooper. Again, the DNA wasn't a match, but it was also inconclusive as it was with others. They got the DNA, by the way, from Cooper's tie, which he kindly left behind before he left. Jack Caulfield also claimed he was Cooper, to a cellmate no less. He apparently suffered broken legs around the same time of the hijacking and was also in the right place. Despite his cellmate swearing it was him and trying to make a few bucks from TV and movies, no one really thinks it was Caulfield. It was just as unlikely to be L.D. Cooper, a war veteran whose niece believed he had done it. Again, there's some interesting implications, but nothing solid. Former pilot and war veteran Robert Rackstraw had all the skills to pull off such a job, and his face looked the part. Rackstraw denied it. His attorney said it was ridiculous, but many believe it was him, and the FBI wouldn't release Cooper's case file under the Freedom of Information Act because they were embarrassed some amateurs had uncovered the case. War veteran Walter R. Recca also said he was D.B. Cooper. Before he died in 2014, he gave details to his friend about the crime that had not been heard before. A fraud examiner and forensic linguist examined the evidence the friend had, and it seemed it all pointed to the fact that Recca could have been D.B. Cooper. Is this the most likely candidate? The Washington Post in 2018 wrote about this, saying, "When the friend may have had compelling evidence in regard to how the crime took place and the details the friend knew, the FBI would not reopen the case if the money or parachutes were not given to them." And so, D.B. Cooper could have been one of those people, or someone else. He could have died in the fall, or there could be a totally different story behind what happened after that eventful flight on Thanksgiving Eve. We love that you enjoy our videos, but maybe you'd like to learn how to make your own. No worries, Skillshare has your back with over 24,000 online classes for both the beginner and the pro. Why not check out the basics of animation? or learn how to light and shoot subjects with one of Skillshare's many online classes in film and digital photography. Skillshare is a perfect place to learn new skills or improve on your existing ones. The first 1,000 people to sign up by visiting Skillshare.com/infographics35 or by clicking the link in the description will receive 2 months of Skillshare absolutely free. Join Skillshare and start learning today. Now we'll turn this over to you and ask you who you think D.B. Cooper was. Tell us in the comments. Also, be sure to check out our other video. This is how Warren Buffett made $85 billion. Dillinger having suffered a gunshot wound during the escape. Dillinger and Evelyn fled to Morse. Infamous prison was located there. The prison closed down, but tales keep being told. That prison had been home to some of America's most notorious criminals, and not for a second did the authorities think any of them could ever escape. That's because even if a prisoner did make it to the edge of the island, it was thought there was no way anyone could make it to land through the frigid and choppy water. The FBI believes that the only people that did ever get to the water died there. Full stop. Game over. It was impossible, but that might not be the case. Before we tell you about the recent revelations that might have proved the FBI were wrong all along, and indeed some men made it through the water and onto land, we think we should tell you about the escape itself. It's worthy of a movie, and that's why myriad movies have been made partly based on this brazen escape. The year is 1962. There have been 12 escape attempts before this year, and all of them failed. Not only did prisoners with escape in mind have to break out of their cells, but they had to scale high walls and get past armed guards. And then there was the dangerous waters of the San Francisco Bay. And as we said, the last hurdle was thought to be insurmountable. But 4 men this year weren't the type of guys to shy away from a challenge. Their names were Clarence Anglin, John Anglin, Alan West, and Frank Morris. And on June 11th, they made perhaps the most daring prison escape attempt ever. You'd be right in thinking that 2 of these men were related. They were actually brothers, and like the other 2 men, they were career criminals. We won't go into their backgrounds much, but it's important we give you a few details, as this might give you a clue as to how these men might have survived. For instance, the 2 Anglin brothers were said to be inseparable as kids, and from a young age, as early as 14, they were both toughing it out as laborers. After that, the duo decided that robbing banks was easier and less strain on the back, and the criminal career started. But the important thing we should mention is that both these guys, when just little kids, were said to enjoy swimming in Lake Michigan during the winter. It's said they impressed people around them by their incredible swimming ability, but also the fact that they could swim when there was still ice in the water. Another thing we should mention was the fact that Frank Morris was said to have a very high IQ. We aren't saying he was a genius, but an IQ of 133 isn't bad at all. So we have strength and we have brains, and it just so happened in 1961, these guys were placed in cells adjacent to each other. Now we see the plot thicken. It was Morris who was the brains of the operation, and he enlisted the 2 brothers who no doubt told him that surviving in the water would be a cinch. They did not wing their escape, however, and over 6 months devised and orchestrated their plan. What they knew they needed to do was widen the ventilation ducts in their respective cells. These ducts were too small for them to crawl into, and so with sharpened spoons and stolen saw blades, as well as a drill they had fashioned from a vacuum cleaner, they got to work. That was a noisy business, making the hole bigger, but the guards didn't hear a thing, as Morris spent most of the night playing his accordion. The guards weren't suspicious because they'd heard this sound before. The thing was, as the holes widened, it looked like a mess in the wall. So what the guys did was paint a piece of cardboard the exact same color as the wall and stick it over the hole in the daytime when they weren't working. You see, what these men knew is that when they got through the hole, they would hit a utility tunnel, a place far away from any guards. After a while, they could easily get into this tunnel, but that didn't mean they could just escape. Even though 2 of them were great swimmers, they knew swimming that distance at night would be hard or impossible, so they devised to make a raft. This took a few months, and the raft was made out of at least 50 raincoats that the men had stolen or other prisoners had given them. They also made paddles out of wood and bolts, and had life jackets. Those life jackets were also made out of raincoats, with the men using a process called vulcanization, a process to heat rubber to make the seams stick so that they could be blown up. It was the same for the raft. The men could make sure no air got out, and they could in time inflate it. But what we like the most is what the guys did to evade suspicion when they were in the tunnel working on the raft. They of course couldn't just go missing from their cells, so they made dummies. We've seen pictures of the heads, and they are unbelievably lifelike considering what they had to work with. The heads were made from cement, skin-colored paint, and the best bit, human hair they'd collected from the prison barbers. It makes you wonder just how creative and industrious these men could have been had they not chosen a life of crime. It took about 6 months to get the raft finished. Now we have the problem of actually getting to the water. This got off to a bad start for West because he'd used a kind of cement to keep his grill in place. What he hadn't reckoned on was the strength of this cement, and he couldn't even get his grill off on June 11th. He was left behind, and his confession is why we know so much about the escape. The other 3 men got into the tunnel, collected the raft and the rest of what they needed, and then they made their way to the roof. We're told from there they scaled down a kitchen vent pipe which was around 50 feet high. They then climbed 2 fences which were covered with barbed wire and were 12 feet high. It seems that they just used their strength, and 12 feet isn't too hard to climb. Now they were in a blind spot from the guards, and this is where they could inflate the raft. That's a lot of blowing for a pair of human lungs, but the guys had the concertina from Morris's accordion. That's the thing you push and pull that acts a bit like a human lung. The guards only realized the next day that the men were missing, and so the escapees had plenty of time to make it to land. The question is, did they make it? An investigation led to a paddle being found, but also bits of raincoat being discovered on the nearby Angel Island beach. Did this mean they got there, or just mean it had floated there? The FBI said that night the currents were really strong, and after many years of trying to find the men, they closed the investigation in 1979. The men had died. That was it. The end. But over the years, siblings of the 2 brothers would come forward and say they'd been contacted by their brothers. Countless other people would lead police on a wild goose chase, saying they were the escapees, or they'd been contacted by the men. It's said at one point the Anglin brothers might have attended a funeral of one of their older brothers, and there have even been sightings in Brazil. It's been called one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in American crime, and to this day, U.S. Marshals say they still get leads as to where these guys are. But the fact is, there hasn't really been any substantial proof that the guys made it. Well, not until a recent bombshell hit the media. That's because in January 2013, the FBI received a letter they didn't tell the media about for a while. They decided to repress it, but they reopened the case. This is how the letter started. My name is John Anglin. I escaped from Alcatraz in June 1962 with my brother Clarence and Frank Morris. I'm 83 years old and in bad shape. I have cancer. Yes, we all made it that night, but barely. The problem was that any DNA analysis was inconclusive, but still, something just rang true about the letter. The writer states that the brains of the group Morris died back in 2008. The writer was obviously one of the surviving brothers. This is what he told the police. If you announce on TV that I'll be promised to first go to jail for no more than a year and to get medical attention, I will write back to let you know exactly where I am. This is no joke. If the brothers did survive, now they would be in their late 80s. Morris would be 91, but he might have died if that letter is real. One thing to note though is that one FBI investigator who'd been with the agency for over 20 years told the media when the letter was released that just saying the raft failed and it was impossible to swim wasn't exactly conclusive. We know these men could swim well, and these days we know many athletes can swim through that water and spend a long time in it. It's hardly an inhuman task to swim the San Francisco Bay. Then there's the fact that investigators say, well, we would have found them, they'd have committed other offenses. That's hardly convincing too. The writer of the letter added that he had lived around the USA after the escape, and if the letter is real, it seems he did become a law-abiding citizen. That, or he just never got caught committing a crime. There's other stuff too, such as what the nephew of the brothers said many years later. My grandmother received roses for several years after the escape, he said to the media. That nephew added that the authorities should allow the writer of the letter to come in and let him be treated, but it seems the authorities had no interest in doing that. Well, the statement was released, so it seems there is some interest. The U.S. Marshal Service has not completely given up. It has publicly stated it will continue to pursue the escapees until they are either arrested, positively determined to be deceased, or reach the age of 99. And I've got an idea for something that might help the Marshals track them down. A great-looking website. With Wix, you can be sure your site is going to look great and be memorable, whether you're trying to find prison escapees or just put together a great personal site. It doesn't matter if you're a design guru or if this is your first website, Wix has the tools you need to get a great-looking website up and running in just minutes. Their selection of hundreds of fully customizable templates lets you drag and drop your way straight to fantastic. Or you can dive right in with their robust design tools and build a fantastic-looking site from the ground up. Plus, with Wix, you can be sure that your site is going to be available and look great on any device. Try out Wix today by visiting the link in the description or going to wix.com/go/infographics2019. This is where the story ends. All we want to ask you is, do you think these men survived, and do you think the letter is real? Tell us in the comments what you think. Also, be sure to check out our other video, What Was It Like to Be Jailed at Alcatraz? Thanks for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.
You